This is Coda Radio, episode 46, for April 22nd, 2013. Hi everyone, you're listening to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode was live Monday 9 a.m. over at jblive.tv. It's brought to you by our fine sponsor GoDaddy.com. I'll tell you more about them as the show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us every week is our host, Mr. Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Good morning, Chris.
Guten Morgen to you, sir. How are you?
I'm good. I feel like I'm lost in the Twilight Zone, but it's okay.
It's sort of a little Groundhog's Day over here today.
Just a little.
Yeah. It's a little, you know what we call that? Bonus material for the live stream. That's
bonus.
What that is.
It's
bonus.
a bonus.
Yeah.
It's a feature, not a bug. That's
we turned that frown upside down.
It's the year of Luigi. Things aren't exactly working as you might expect.
So what are we going to talk about today, Mr. Dominic, now that things are working?
I forgot.
I think we were going to talk about how things never fail. No, yeah, getting into the zone. See, we lost our zone.
And we also have some hoopla about the health of little A app stores, right? So
man, I feel like I'm going to get fired up on that one.
The concept, not the Mac app store, per se.
Maybe some systemic problems?
Always so negative.
I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't. I won't color it. I won't color. We'll just get there, and what happens, happens. And I'm really looking forward to the getting in the zone talk, because I find that there's some maybe routines that I follow, and I'm definitely more productive when I'm quote unquote in the zone. So I'll be curious we'll exchange notes on that one. Should we start with the feedback though?
Let's do it.
All right. Daniel Craig writes in on YouTube. Actually, James Bond is watching our videos. Did you know
007 writes in?
007 writes, I've heard that the requirements of a code base, when they shift more than 25% or so, it becomes faster to start from scratch than to try to update the code. Greg Wilson brought this up in his talk, What We Actually Know About Software Development and Why We Believe It's True. Basically, the most costly part of coding isn't the coding, it's nailing down the requirements. Once you have those, starting over is relatively cheap.
Agreed.
And, that's definitely an attitude we see in the open source community a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I would also add that, particularly on contracting basis, if you have a fixed bid or a fixed budget project, and 25% of it shifts, that is a contract that is not likely to end well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you look at, let's just take, people love it and hate it when we talk about Ubuntu. Let's talk about what Canonical's doing with their desktop, where they threw out the whole desktop and decided to write Unity, and now they're looking at it from a different perspective and saying, hold on, we have a whole nother set of requirements. And they're going to rewrite huge majorities of it again to meet those new requirements. And for them, it was just easier to we have to start over. And I see it all the time. But unfortunately, when it comes to the software that runs a small business, and it's maybe a small team where that component isn't their business, it just helps facilitate the business, so they don't always quite associate the correct value with it. That's where these things languish, and that's where you go way beyond this 25% number that Daniel has identified here. I'm thinking of this project that I came in on a year ago, and we came in because, like we talked about this last week, there was a lot of technical debt. There was just stuff that the original creator, he spent 10 years building this site and all of the backend and associated stuff that goes with it. And there's a lot of physical paper input that goes into this. It's a very sophisticated system. He built it for 10 years and then just became completely overwhelmed and quit. And he just burned out. So then this another guy comes in and he starts working on it. And his primary goal is get it back up and running. We've been down for 2 weeks and we're bleeding. So he gets it back up and running. But when you start at a sort of a crisis point like that, you always end up you never really get out of crisis mode. And so, he's now maybe doubled the size of this project and just made it more complicated and made it more interdependent and slower and less stable than it was before in some respects. I mean, in other respects, it's more stable. And that's just there's no way. I mean, he's probably doubled the code size, and there's no way you could go to them and tell them to throw that out and start over. They would just fire you before they'd ever do that. Have you ever run into that?
Yeah, isn't that always the problem? One thing I run into too is the crisis scenario is exactly something I've seen more than once. But also let's just build a fast prototype. And then we build a prototype, everybody likes the prototype. Oh, but no, we can't throw that out. We've invested in that.
Mm.
Let's make the prototype the production product. It's really the same scenario. And I do agree with you, Daniel, that I would even say like the 10% mark if it's a fixed bid, because that's a big loss on your bottom line. The problem is I haven't found a good way to do this with a client who's unwilling to basically up the dollar amount, right?
Yeah, and then what I'm always up against, at least for my type of work, and I think maybe because mine is a little more generalized, whereas if you're working with a developer who's got a specific language that he specializes in, you might be a little more limited in your options of who could do that job. But in my case, you really just need a good Linux admin and somebody who can do some Windows work and all the things that I do. And while there's not so many people that do it well, there's a lot of people that say they can do it. And so if I come up to them and I say, we got to scrap this and start over, and I know it sounds like I'm just trying to make a buck here, but this is really the best thing for your business, and I'm a consultant, and I don't say it like this, obviously, but I'm a consultant, and I'm consulting with you right now. This is what you need to do. And they'll say to me, okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fisher, and they'll go hire somebody who will charge them a lot less and just keep it running forever, or make them think they can keep it running forever.
See, there's another facet, though, especially for front-end development. Often you'll show them wireframes, they'll sign off of them, and they want an app for X dollars, so they get the experience that goes along with X dollars. And then, well, that's not really what I meant to sign off on.
Right.
Right. Well, you sign the design doc. And it's again to when you have a soft. I feel like sysadmin's done his job, at least as far as the business is concerned, if the servers are running. Right, or they're running, quote, fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
For a dev, especially in the mobile space and the web space, people will sign off on anything to get to the quote they need. Right, that's basically the bottom line.
Yeah.
To keep it down to the dollar amount they want.
Mm-hmm.
But especially people who haven't been in the industry, they kind of think, well, can't we just change the user flow? Can't we rip out the whole nav stack and do, we've done this tab bar application, let's rip it out and do a side panel. Right, at the 11th hour.
Right, yeah.
No additional time or cost.
That's not a big deal, right?
That's not a big deal. And that's why, it's one of the weird things. I kind of prefer to deal with people who've been doing this for a while.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I know.
Because it's interesting. They know they don't know what they want, so they balk at fixed bid right away. They don't want it.
Yeah, that's a great place to start from if you can. Yeah.
Because really, a fixed bid, when there's something... it's even worse when there's layers of management, because obviously the person that called you...
Yeah. They might know, but if their boss doesn't know...
Yeah, has already promised his or her boss that,
exactly.
No, we can do this for X dollars. Then when you tell them, well, we can do this, but not that, here's the document, read it over, sign it, if you agree on that statement of work, and they sign it, and all of a sudden you're dealing with somebody else, usually right before they're supposed to sign off on final delivery, that has decided that, either that person wasn't authorized to say that or whatever. Or that they're just not happy.
Have you ever got trapped in the game where they do the car salesman thing, where you're working with the IT contact, and then he goes back to his boss, and his boss plays the hard manager who won't compromise, and then he comes back to you and says, well, what if we kind of shave off something here? Have you ever had that happen to you? Where they kind of do like this good cop, bad cop thing?
Yeah, I've gotten into the space where once it was determined that the document my contact had signed kind of didn't give the organization a ton of leverage. So they had started from a very aggressive position of, we're going to sue you. But I said, that's fine. You have a contract, so I don't understand how. I just got someone totally different. And it just came down to, we signed the contract. Then they called back and said, well, how much to get it, to get a new statement of work? And I just said, no. Said, call somebody else.
Oh, man.
that's something that can happen, especially, you know, it's really risky working with people. You know, when I send out a wireframe comp or documentation on what I'm proposing to do, if I don't get any negative feedback, if I just get a sign off, I'm now a little worried, right?
Yeah,
Because
because
there's
you
a
think they're not
chance
looking at it.
I feel like they just went to the bottom of the document, saw the total quote, and were like, "Yep,
Yeah, that met our dollar. That met our dollar figure that we had planned.
that's something my director will sign off on." So it's a terrible situation, and unfortunately, I think we talked about this in like episode 4 or 5, that you really want to be dealing with the decision maker, right? Like the person you get to sign to
Yeah,
contract should also
yeah.
be the person that, if there's a problem, wants to terminate it, not some layer of management between you. Because it's just, first thing, the lower manager may not know that, okay, they said their budget was X, but really they can do X times 2
Huh.
if it's what they want.
If you just told them why.
If you just told them why, but that manager is going to just stonewall you at X
Mm-hmm.
when it goes to his or her
And you
boss.
always get everybody. So, yeah, because that makes them look better if they get it at a certain thing. So they're at a certain price point. So they're more inclined to try to push you down on that.
And the issue is, if you don't hear about the problem till the 11th hour, what would have been on day one, okay, it's going to be a little more money, but we can definitely do that, is now even more money because now you have to go back and undo work you've already done. Right. So then that's,
yeah.
I've been, fixed bid is an interesting beast, and it's a topic in its own, because especially when you try and shove agile into fixed bid, or what a lot of biz dev folks think agile means in terms of, being able to change the spec. And now I'm going to say a dirty word, Chris. Are you ready?
Oh, all right, I'm ready.
Ready to bleep me? Waterfall. That's how I solve this problem.
With the waterfall method. Boom, right in their face. Just waterfall over their face, right?
Detailed documentation. I'm deadly serious. I use Balsamic. We have screen caps of the whole user flow, annotated out with any potential animations and a description, so that when they sign it, it's, there's no vagueness.
Wow, do you build them for that time to do all that?
Yeah, I do.
Good for you, man. Good for you.
It's a very new process. I used to not do it because it's kind of my opinion, a bad use of time.
Yeah, well, I could see that, especially when you're a one-man shop.
Right. If it comes down to the point where, no, it has to be X dollars, and we definitely want to review the experience as we go through, then okay, but this is, because it's just business. Exactly. Thank you. Past me. But again, I don't think that's the best way to develop software. I think that's one of the worst ways to develop software. Because if your highest priority is dollar, is budget, what is it? Fast, good, or cheap, right? Pick two. Mm-hmm. So we can get it to you cheap and good, but it'll be slow as a dog. Or we can get it to you fast and cheap, and it won't have that, quote, Apple experience you're looking for.
Oh.
Especially if you fail to hire a designer to cut assets, which has happened more than twice.
And, I won't even get into the testing aspect and how that's just been colossal.
No one wants to pay for QA ever.
No
one wants to pay for testing.
So I've run into this situation where they don't want to revamp the system, and it is absolutely fundamental. This software stack is absolutely fundamental to this business. Without it, if the service is offline, no aspect, the people at their desk cannot do their job, their customers remotely cannot use their service, and they do not fulfill state contracts. And so it is like that critical to their business. If it goes away, they go away absolutely and completely. And I've said to them, this doesn't have many more years left in it at all. It is falling down around us constantly. We've got to replace it, and they don't want to hear it. They just don't want to hear it. And so in that situation, it's like, okay, well, now I'm just going to gracefully document what I can and make my exit.
That's all you can do. I mean, I think a few weeks back, or maybe, Chris, a few months back, I told a story about how I was in a project where it was just leaking memory like a sieve. And I had to write up, I'm sure you've written that letter. This will not function because of previous work. Here's a quote to attempt to fix it.
And you don't want to sound like you're pinning it on the previous guy.
Right. You don't want to nail the other guy to the cross, but you need to make the client aware of the problem so
Right.
he doesn't come back with a lawyer and, be like, well, you broke our app. And the nice thing is, in this case, the person knew, and that's why they called me. And they just wanted to tack, believe it or not, another feature onto the project. That's all they called me for. And I said, you really shouldn't release this. Like just
Yeah. Okay. So, not to go too far off the
yeah.
tracks here, but so here I am. I'm in this meeting. So the meeting was called because they wanted to know why it runs so much slower now that I'm working on it.
Tell
And
them you put some oil, just what is it? Some jelly, some molasses right in the tracks in the server. There's little wheels in the servers.
because they've had this for 10 years and it's never ran as slow as it does right now. No, never mind that they've never had more traffic. They've never had higher resolution images. Of course, everybody's got broadband now, and it's way more users than they've ever had. So they sit me down. We want to know, tell us why it runs slower when you're our admin, when the other guy was our admin. Can you explain that to me? So that's how the conversation started when I sat down, and then eventually got into the position of saying, look, this is just a spaghetti mess, and it's fallen off the rails as fast as it can fall off the rails. And it's sort of this arc of where we start at a point of sort of they're looking at it from one angle that is like they are totally seeing it in a completely different way that I see it, right? They just see it needs a few things, and hey, by the way, we'd like to add OCR features to our site for people that have disability problems, so we'd like it to read to them. And I'm like, and of course these are all like PDFs and TIFF files and JPEGs that would have to be OCR'd.
OCR'd.
I don't, I'm just like, you want to add that processing to the system when we can barely. It just blows me away. They just completely are disconnected.
That's the problem. First off, I'm really surprised that they just called you into a room and started so aggressively. I don't.
Isn't that?
I mean,
that's man.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. I know I'm not the nicest person sometimes, but I at least, if I know I'm going into a confrontation, or it's happened before, having to review past contractors' work, or do you ever get called on review projects where all you're doing is auditing somebody else's work?
Yeah, not as much these days, but that used to be a big part of what I used to do.
Yeah, I've been doing it a little more recently because there's a number of, I guess, overseas shops that are starting to do iOS, and it seems like they're not doing a tremendously good job.
Oh, and then they need somebody to check it out.
Yeah, so I've been kind of called in, and honestly, like, I'm not one of the guys who's like, oh, screw them, you shouldn't outsource anyway. I kind of feel bad because, the person who paid for the software is screwed.
Yeah.
The person who's been hired to do this I'm basically writing a document that's going to
explains how they've screwed up,
boil them alive, right? And I'm just there collecting, a little bit of money, doing nothing, but it's kind of like, okay, if it's offshore, you don't have to see them face to face, but sometimes one of the worst cases, it was somebody's cousin that they hired. The kid was in college, and they just kind of brought him on as a 1099 contractor. And I'm sitting there with him, we're going over, and I felt awful. But I didn't start like your guy started. So what the hell, bro?
Yeah, well, this guy's the son of the owner. So it's like this whole family. And you know what? I really like these people, but they're just very direct because it's a family-run business, and that's how they talk to each other.
Of course, it's a business. You need to be direct, but you could start a meeting with, can I get you a coffee? Do you need water? I mean,
right.
I don't know. To me, there's a certain kind of like just being civil.
Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely took me by surprise. It caught me flat-footed, but I have been in situations where there's somebody who's just very direct and maybe a little too direct, and then there's situations where it comes from a place of anger, and those are the ones that actually upset me more. And this one was just more of like we don't understand and it's frustrating. I don't know.
My favorites are, when you get called into a meeting like that, and so it's actually the same project where I wrote the review, and it was the guy's cousin, and he called me the following day upset. And I said, well, it's all in the document. We discussed, you told me you had these issues. These are potential sources of your issue.
What happens a lot too is like sometimes when you're doing that review process, one of the things that's in the worst state is like one of the guy's hobby projects. Like he's real proud of it. Like he's like, yeah, look what I did over here.
Well,
like,
that was this. I'm not going to say what the kind of business they're in, but this app was supposed to bring them into the future, right? This was being on the App Store was supposed to be like, they're modernizing, they're getting hip, they're getting sexy.
Yeah.
And this guy's yelling at me as though I were his cousin. Was it nephew or cousin? I can't remember. And I'm like, I said, I'm sorry. I'm not the guy who wrote this code. I said, if you like, we can have a meeting or we can talk right now about what it would cost for me to do this work. I said, but, the code is in such a state that I'm not really comfortable continuing with what you currently have. So if you do want to engage me, we're going to have to start from zero. And he was so angry.
Mm.
But it doesn't make sense. Why is that directed at me? Right? I had nothing to do with this guy's problem.
Yeah. Yeah, you just didn't see his vision. You didn't see the vision. How
In
could
fact,
you?
I had bid on the project and he had rejected my bid as absurd, which is hilarious. But so
Oh man, yeah, that
yeah.
whole bid process. Sometimes I go in there and I find out that somebody took my bid and gave it to a cheaper guy, and that.
Well, and in this case, I did feel bad because I felt like because of the family connection,
Yeah.
it would probably have been a lot harder for him to rip apart the developer who did the work.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is funny how that was both of our stories that were family related. I wonder how common that is. Because the chat room's kind of joking about that too. Maybe it's more common than we think.
I think it might be because working with family is just not a great idea, in my opinion.
Don't tell that to my wife. Does she count? She's done all right so far, though.
Yeah,
I'm keeping a close eye on her, though. Let me tell you.
Oh, Angie's tough, man. I owed her some kind of email blurb, and then she was on me. Oof.
Dude, who do you think was the last guy to get that email blurb back to her? This guy.
I don't know. I got it midnight, the deadline. I had to type it out from an iPad in bed because I had been traveling, I had been visiting clients, and then I went to my wife's family, and I totally forgot. Wife's fiance.
She's working on sprucing up the website.
Yeah,
she's getting it all. She's getting all like
business.
Like she's getting it all business like.
I need to get a photo.
One of the changes to the website was pushed while we were doing this show.
Oh my God! All right, we should move on because we've burned 20 minutes of the show on.
All right. Well, thank you to Daniel for leaving that comment on the YouTube video. Not that we read the YouTube comments, so don't get any ideas, YouTubers, right? Because we obviously never read them.
Okay, Chris reads the YouTube comments. I don't, because I don't like you people.
All right, before we get into the hoopla, I want to thank this week's sponsor, and that would be GoDaddy.com. GoDaddy.com are fans of the Coder Radio program, and they figured probably quite a bit of you out there use the GoDads for your .coms, and we have a great discount for you. When you're checking out, use the code CODER295. Now, check this out. You got to look around sometimes. Sometimes it can be a little hidden. Sometimes I call them hidden little boxes. And you need to go discover these hidden little boxes when you're checking out, and you type in the code CODER, because you like Coder Radio and you like development, so use the code CODER. And then $2.95 because you're getting that .com for $2.95. Now, that also works for transfers. That's actually a pretty sweet deal. So when you're over there at GoDaddy, use that code CODER295, and also you can click that link in our show notes. Let GoDaddy know that you appreciate them sponsoring the show and that you like them sponsoring the Coder Radio program, so that way we make a little money for doing this show. And we really appreciate you guys supporting our sponsors because they keep us going. So go over to GoDaddy.com and use the code CODER295er. That's a 295er, like somebody on the radio would say, with a 5 and a 9er. But I don't know what they say for 2. CODER295 over at GoDaddy.com. And thank you to GoDaddy for sponsoring this week's episode of Coder Radio. All right, Mr. Dominic, I believe we have some hoopla to jump into.
Yeah, so we talked about it a bit last week. Appgratis was pulled from the App Store after being on there for several months for some alleged App Store violation. And you know how information loves to leak out of email.
Mm-hmm.
So I linked it in the doc, this information of them basically telling some developer that for $300,000, they could get them to the top of the U.S. App Store chart, right? So basically the top 20 or top 10, whatever it is. So it does appear that this was a pure pay-to-play situation.
What do you mean by that?
Well, pay-to-play is a term from the old radio business, right, where Sony or whatever company would want their music played, so they would straight up pay the DJ to play it.
Oh, yeah, Payola kind of stuff. Yeah.
Payola, exactly.
Yeah.
This situation is, however Appgratis does it, there's been talk of basically them using bots. You pay them X dollars to get X ranking. And that's it, right? Because the strongest feature, the strongest metric the App Store uses is downloads.
And it's like big money too, right?
Right. This is not something you could take, $5,000.
No, it says here, for example, this document shows Appgratis estimates $300,000 will buy you an app in the top 5 slot in the U.S. version of the App Store. So if you pay them $300,000, Or is it you're paying Appgratis?
Yes, that's what it seems like. Now they flatly deny the use of bots, but as these documents continue to leak, it's pretty clear.
And it makes sense from like Minato saying in the chat room. This is the new version of advertising in a sense, because you once you own that top spot for a little while, you get it's logarithmic how much more downloads. It's just huge. It explodes.
Yeah, it's really, and as I experienced myself, it's pretty. Just being on that top spot is pretty for any category.
Well, and it's funny because it's not just, although it's what's relevant to this conversation, obviously, but it's not just the App Store that works like this. That's also essentially how the iTunes podcast ranking works too. And in episode, I think it was episode 1 or 2 of Plan B, we asked people, hey, just since it's our new show, will you please go give us some comments in the iTunes Store because it helps with discovery?
Right.
We got like 4 or 5 people and another 4 or 5 people to rate it. 4 or 5 people have to comment, 4 or 5 people rate it or something like that. We were on the front page of Up and Coming for 2 days because of that.
Yeah, well, I think Coda Radio was as well. It's just, these are all algorithms in the background, right? And the biggest indicator is good comments, good ratings, I should say, and downloads. Now, I don't have any special information. I've never done business with Appgratis. I have no idea if this is true. The evidence is.
It's a leaked email. I mean, seems pretty true to me.
Yeah, and there's been a number of other leaked emails you can.
And we've also heard of those scenarios where I can't remember if it was Sony or there was some big company that just got smacked down by YouTube because they were buying tens of thousands of views on YouTube and they were using bots to do it. And a lot of these people, like in that case, were using bots via Facebook. Like there's people that, I don't know if it's like some sort of crap app on Facebook that does it or if there's malware that spreads via Facebook or what. And for them, it's now $300,000. I'm sure isn't chump change, but it's for them it's within their marketing budget, and they'll just toss that in there. They'll own it. So not only do they get sort of this, not only does the door kind of open for them because of the brand name of EA or Activision or whatever, whoever's doing this.
To be clear, you have no reason to think that EA or Activision's actually done this.
As far as I know, but it would take somebody. It would take a big company to drop $300,000.
Right, and I don't think it's a great idea to start naming people who.
Let's call them Rovio.
No, let's. I mean, that's not fair, right? You don't know that they've done it.
No, I don't know if I don't know who's done it. No,
see, I could
tell you, it's not somebody who's a 5-person team or even a 10-person team. When you're talking,
it's not Jupiter Broadcasting or Fingertip Tech Inc. Right?
Right. Well, when you're talking $300,000, you got to be of a certain category to drop that kind of money.
I don't even have that in revenue.
Well, and so how do you compete? Because so here's my point. The reason why I use those names is because if you can afford that kind of money, then you also have one of those brand names. And so the door is sort of open for you on that front too.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly agree that you have to have significant financial resources, relative to being a mobile developer versus being, let's be honest, the cost to develop a mobile game versus a AAA game is very, very different. So if you're in the AAA game business, you definitely have resources.
Oh, it says here that the price varies also depending on the price of the app. So maybe
they charge you their rate. Right? So it's perfectly logical.
Right.
Plus the price of the app.
Yep.
Now, I want to reiterate that I have never done business with these people or anyone like them.
So if you had a free app, then you could probably get away with $100,000. So that's a big discount.
Right. And let's get away from naming names of people who may or may not have done this, right? Because to me, this is a very serious charge. Right? This isn't the App Store equivalent of jaywalking. This is like Murder One. Because basically what this does is the idea of all these independent app stores is that, Fingertip Tech and EA can go head to head. And in theory, if I have a better product, I should do just as well as EA or better.
Right.
Now, that's, of course, a very naive way to look at it. And for those who don't know, Fingertip Tech is the name of my company. I understand that that's naive, but that's the goal. And that's also the goal of the internet, right? That's why Google, when they have their wide-eyed, dreamy statements about HTML, that's what they're talking about. And it's something I at least believe in. And this kind of violation of that basic tenet of, a level playing field, it really needs to be slapped down, as hard as possible. Which, in this case, I think If they're really guilty of what Apple seems to think they've done, then yeah, rip them down.
Well, Apple must have the metrics, right? I mean, they got the logs. They got the purchase histories. They got IP logs. I'm sure they've, you
I'm
know.
sure they know. And additionally, if you're a developer, when you hear about this or you find out your competitors doing this, what's your first phone call going to be? Right? Aren't you going to complain to Apple that the store is being gamed? And in real dollars, that's hurting your business.
The problem is that this just seems like a whack-a-mole thing. Because so what's happening here is bots are going into iTunes and buying apps. So the only way they could really prevent that would be some sort of change to iTunes that tries to prevent that, I guess. Because otherwise, anybody, how does I guess the piece that I'm missing is how does getting kicked out of the App Store prevent any of this? Where's the connection?
Well, that's the thing, right? So then the Appgratis folks came back and said they're just pivoting their app to HTML5. So if you are an Appgratis customer, please go to our mobile website and pin it to your home screen. So I don't know what it does, right? I really
just makes it harder interacting with their service. But you could still use the service.
Yeah, I mean, if they're really guilty of everything they seem to have done, it does virtually nothing to what appears to be their main business, right?
Former CEO of OMG Pop, Dan Porter, wrote in a post on All Things D last week that this is a huge problem and that App Store rankings are very important to Apple as the company does its best to keep them as fair and democratic as possible. But apps like Appgratis have artificially inflated rankings, and if developers pay enough to get promoted, he says he claims, this is according to the OMG Pop CEO, that Apple's working very hard to try to prevent this gaming. I believe it, but either way they make money. That's also kind of if those bots are actually buying these apps, then Apple's making money off this gaming system.
Yeah, but Apple doesn't want this to be a thing, right? I mean, this isn't good. Are you suggesting this is actually good for Apple?
Well, if that bot brings 100,000 more purchases than it would have otherwise been there, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying they're making 100,000 more sales than they would have.
No, the 100,000. I mean, okay, theoretically, sure, but they're also polluting their own ecosystem, which is long-term bad.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's why some developers are afraid to develop an Android because they feel the ecosystem's corrupt or polluted in some way.
That'd be them pissing in the well, basically.
Right. And it would be, punching the pizza boy, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. The other thing too, like Minotaur was saying, is not only is it 100,000 bot purchases that they would have never gotten, but then substantially more real customer purchases once it reaches in those top lists that they might not have gotten. I mean, it's a real win-win.
That's a very short-sighted way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
but I think that's how a lot of people look at it. They don't care. Hey, as long as I can get in here and make my buck, I don't care what the long-term impact is.
100,000 downloads for Apple, let's say at 99 cents. So that's 30%. I mean, that's not from their, bank account, that's a rounding error.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't matter. What matters is the image of the App Store.
Now, don't take this the wrong way, but it could be, in some cases, the more money than any small developer will ever bring them in total in just one gaming session.
It could be, but it's still not enough money.
It just seems like Goliath and is just like running around in the App Store doing whatever the heck he wants, and it's not nearly, actually, now you look at it, not nearly as democratic as we all think it is. It's so far from that, actually.
Well, also keep in mind, Apple spends a lot on branding, and all these companies do. They're not going to I'm pretty sure Google would hit just as hard on something like this. And I'm sure Microsoft would, because your ecosystem needs to be healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at all the crap Canonical's getting for errors or mistakes in the Ubuntu Software Center. And how little developer adoption. Now, part of that's because it's not a widely used platform. But there are developers who probably would develop for it, but won't because they, frankly, don't have their shit together. And, I'll even see to you that Apple could make a quick $200,000 off of these gaming sessions. It's not worth it. It's just not enough money that they care about. Right? Apple counts billions, not hundreds.
Yeah, I agree. Although the other, and I'll get off this after I just make this last
Yeah.
point. The other thing that looks good for them is when a company, a big name company, likely again, I'm just saying that if when you look at the dollar amount here, comes in and has a success, and that success by the tech press is measured by that chart. And when it's at the number one spot in that chart or number five in that chart, and it's got a bunch of purchases and a bunch of stars, then everybody writes, the new I don't know what game. I don't really know what these companies make, but the new Zombie
Need for
Smasher
Speed
game,
or whatever.
the
Yeah.
new Need for Speed came out and it sat at number one for the first 3 days, and it's doing amazing in the App Store. Go get it now.
Right.
That makes Apple look good because it makes the App Store look like it's a happening marketplace where big companies come in and make a lot of money. It makes the Need for Speed guys look really good because their app is doing well. I
Sure.
mean, I don't know. And everybody's making money now.
Have you ever seen a movie by a little known actor called Sylvester Stallone from the 70s?
Never
It's
heard of
a
this guy,
it's
but he sounds
it's
like a
a
stallion.
it's a boxing film, yes. It's called Rocky. It won a number of awards and it's pretty much a classic.
Huh.
My point is everybody expects Apollo Creed to win, but it's really nice when a better story to write about is an underdog winning, right?
Yeah, but
Let's
that's a movie.
really, well, let's talk about Super Meat Boy. Let's talk about Fez.
All right, that's fine.
All
I
right.
mean, no, I agree, but those are
Yeah.
more like blips on the radar than they
Right, but
are
they
actual.
are great link bait.
They're just
Right.
they don't. I guess what I'm saying is their success doesn't disprove the overall issue where everybody still wins when there's cheating going on. I guess if I could just, the only people who don't win are the people who don't make them very much money anyways.
Well, so that segues kind of into our other topic. 'Cause I think what you're getting onto is that the problem is with these big players, the cost and the quote bar for developing a successful iOS app is much higher than it used to be,
Yeah.
right? And that you need more. I mean, let's forget about gaming the system because that's an illicit thing, right? I mean, that's like to me, that's like putting some spyware in your applications for Windows. I mean, very few indies are doing it. So or do you want to say anything else about this?
No, I made my piece.
Okay, yeah, because I feel like we're just going to agree to disagree, and that'll be it. So my bestest buddy, Marco Arment, wrote a post that the App Store is not dead, and he goes into all these reasons, all these successes, and very well reasoned article. I suggest if you're an indie developer that you absolutely read it. It's on marco.org. I think it's like the third link from the bottom because there's a few ads between it that don't look like ads, but that's another issue. Basically, he concludes it, which is a spot on line, right? The App Store is fine, or the market is fine. The bar is just higher, which I agree with him 100%. And this is the only time you're going to hear me say that. So tape it and be done with it. Except I don't agree with the last line. I agree with this whole argument. But the fact that the bar is higher, and this is not, when you say, oh, the bar is a little higher. Oh, okay, so you need to hire a designer now. We're not talking a little higher anymore, right? We're talking astronomically high. Oh, and by the way,
a new category, really, a new
right,
league.
If your app is even 99 cents, you're going to get 1,000th of downloads you would if it were free or some kind of free-to-play freemium model.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wrote a follow-up or a response to it titled, No, the market is not fine. Just other than being incredibly trolly.
Who, you?
Me? Never. I love this guy. So just to give you a little inside baseball, the iOS developer community has been a little torn apart. Jean-Louis Gasset, who now works at Apple and used to work at Apple but took some sort of break, has been urging for months that iOS and Mac developers raise their damn prices because basically we're getting killed. Also, notice the new WordPress theme.
I like that.
Thank you.
That's nice, man.
Thank you.
This is funny because I think this is an argument pre-App Store, before all this stuff, when prices were already starting to drop, that Brian was making to me on the Linux Action Show about why he felt like we needed to have commercial applications on Linux because we were sort of having this bleeding and draining of the market, and he was saying we need to raise prices. So I don't think this is it's not a completely new discussion, but it's sort of there's definitely a new paradigm and a lot more market pressure to lower those prices.
There's a tremendous amount of pressure to keep your prices low. And he has a 5-part post series. And I have to say, these are some of the most well-written blogs I've read in a long time. So definitely go find them. If after the show I can find them, I'll throw them in the show notes. But the bottom line is, he looks at the only chart that really matters, top grossing, which is how the apps that actually make money. And it turns out, and I wrote a post similar to this several months ago, most of them charge more than 99 cents, and most of them charge more. The time I wrote it, the average was, I think, like $14. The time he wrote it, the average was, I think, 20. So in fact, the price has gone up.
Mm.
Now there's a little bit of there's some apps in there like the Omni Groups apps that are about $100 or $150 a piece. So they do skew the numbers, right? So it's not to say that they're all $15 or more. It's to say that this is an average. So, take it for what it's worth. You all know basic math. On the other side, and there have been a number of other well-respected Apple developers who've been fighting this fight with him. The other side of the coin, a lot of folks, and this is the age-old argument, right, that volume will make up for unit price sales.
Right.
Right. It hasn't worked out for a lot of people.
Well, what you need to do is spend $100,000.
Yeah. We have the solution in the last story. Chris, I got to make a phone call.
You just got to transfer that money to a PayPal account.
No, it's got to be Bitcoin. Got to be Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Or
a Litecoin if you really want to get ahead of the curve.
Right. Oh my God, I don't even know what that is. I'm frightened. I don't want to know about your shady ass currencies, but
spooky currencies.
Yeah.
I just use them for all my terrorism.
Wow.
Well, I'm assuming that's where the conversation will go eventually, is that they're terrorist money. So I just thought I just like to be hip. I like to be a money hipster. Oh, you're calling that terrorism money? I called it that a long time ago.
You should go back to the gold standard then, because that was retro and everything.
All right, I can do it.
Like the steampunk version of currency.
Yeah, I like that.
You made me lose my train of thought.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So.
Right. So.
Yeah.
Right. So then, if you read my article, which I think you should, the basic point, right? Yes, the bar is higher, but is that good, right? Because here's simultaneously, and something that I felt Marco kind of glosses over, or perhaps enjoys himself, so doesn't really think is a bad thing, that users are demanding better, quote, user experiences. And unfortunately, for most developers, that equals hiring designers. Even worse, not all designers are created equal, just like developers. So you probably are hiring expensive designers. That's more capital to get your project running, right? Additionally, now I'm going to say you need to market your app, but not in the way that Appgratis would have you market your app, allegedly. We're talking things like maybe Facebook ads or Chris, they could do ads on podcasts. Do you know that?
Well, there you go.
That would be a great idea. Your friendly local coding podcast.
With advertising space available, premium advertising space, just contact us.
By the way, download CodeJournal from the Mac App Store. That also costs money, right, to do those kind of plugs.
Yeah.
And what this is coming down to is...
Oh my God, they're stealing money out of my pocket.
No, it costs more money to be an even remote success, which is okay, right? Market's mature. Except people are now not willing, $1.99 is now, quote, expensive, and $4.99 is, what are you, nuts? That's a problem. That's an equation that isn't balanced for all you algebra friends. It's eventually going to fall on its face, and it has, and it's been very sad, right? A lot of mobile developers in the last year or 2 years have gone under.
I got to speak for the masses then. Maybe I know there's if anybody is still tuned in this far, they probably don't exist if they have this opinion, but I would say there's got to be somebody who's thinking, well, screw mobile, screw app stores, screw it all, stick with the desktop. What do you think of that? Is that just so like not even an option anymore in your view, or is that still a practical way to make a living? Really, because it seems like it almost seems like mobile completely dominates the conversation these days, even though there's still millions of desktop.
Yeah, I mean, mobile has a big install base, so there's a desktop. The problem is right now we're in this weird space. When you say the desktop, what do you mean? Do you mean
a laptop? I'm kind of picturing maybe like a PC.
Well, right. Do you mean Mac or do you mean Windows? And if you mean Windows, do you mean traditional Windows or do you mean WinRT? Right, or Or do you mean the desktop, but really just a native wrapper around HTML technology, which is an increasingly popular strategy? Right? That's the problem. I think what's really happening is people are saying, screw mobile, I'm going to the web. Which, again, traditionally getting paid for software on the web has been.
Which is nice because, I mean, for them, it's also a new opportunity. But I think even when they're going for the web, they're still talking very seriously about, well, how is it going to work on mobile? That's a huge part of the conversation
Yeah,
still.
I don't know. So if you read my post, I don't propose a solution to the problem. I'm just stating that I would agree with Gasset that there is a problem, but I wouldn't agree in that I don't think we can just go ahead and start charging more money now. Right? I don't think that's for mainstream applications. I don't think that's super plausible anymore.
You'd have to have your Apples, your Googles, and your Microsofts probably start releasing their own apps at a higher price point. Because I mean, when you have Apple putting apps in there, they're sort of saying, here's the price point for a high quality app, right? And when Microsoft
Keynote,
puts
Keynote is $20, right? So it's really hard to charge more than that.
and it's, to be fair, it's a fully fledged application.
Yeah, Keynote's it's PowerPoint essentially, right?
Yeah, and I think, and see, let's look at what did Microsoft do? They gave they're giving away OneNote Metro. They're giving away Metro OneNote in the.
They're giving away Office Metro too if you have a device.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm just talking about like setting a precedent with price in the store. There you kind of are dependent on the curators of these app stores to set the tone.
Right, and it does seem like the market has evolved in a way that perhaps me and you in the chat room won't like, into freemium being the most viable model, particularly for games, at least on these platforms.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then that brings us back to the Ouya, doesn't it? In a way,
Yeah,
low price
it does.
point, low cheap apps. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
And I think to be fair, that's why tablets. All right, the Nexus 7 is doing pretty well. The iOS apps have always pretty much sold the devices because you buy an expensive device once, but then you go cheap apps, kind of the flip of the Nintendo model, although even more streamlined. So I mean, I understand why mobile dominates the conversation. I really do. I just wanted to play devil's advocate for the people who are maybe twisting in their chair right now, kind of going like, why aren't we talking about desktop? Why are we so concerned about App Store?
The thing is, this is less painful on desktop right now. You can still get away with charging, between $10 and $20 for desktop applications.
Right.
But you have to define desktop as traditional Windows and Mac, and potentially Linux. But basically, I just want to exclude WinRT from this, right? Because WinRT, if you take a look at the App Store, it is functioning like a mobile app store.
Yeah.
In terms of pricing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would say the other reason why it probably dominates the conversation so much is because this is a technology and an aspect of the industry. This is software and related technologies in the business of software that are still being figured out. We're still defining them, and this show is taking place during that time in our history. And at some point in the future, all this stuff will be obvious. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see this future going is that freemium will probably be the default for mobile apps. Only because, Apple really set the tone by not allowing free trials.
Mm.
And so freemium is kind of the best of both worlds on mobile, right? You get the downloads you would to increase your ranking. Yeah, you have to deal with some people who may be a little more hard to support because they have. So that's the other side of this argument, though, right? Is that the problem is that users are demanding more for less or no money. And they're increasingly disappointed when they don't get that, quote, premium experience.
You can start with a freemium app as a user.
Right.
Like if something comes out, like if the developer. So here's the nice thing: is the developer can kind of generate, if they do it right, more of a trickle revenue stream where, we've updated a new feature. If you'd like that feature, just buy it now inside the app.
And that may be something that some people adopt.
You start with a minimum viable product that is free, and then all of the features you plan as you release them, you just charge for them. I mean, that sort of pays for development as you go too. I definitely think you're right. I mean, I think that's probably the way it's going to shake out. It's just then we have to define how the advertising space, if that's going to work, how spammy that gets, how dirty that gets, how the tracking has to work.
it's like the AAA game DLC problem. At what point are you, quote, adding content, or are you really just cutting content off of your product to make it a purchase?
Well, yeah, that's going to be a huge problem. I
Right.
mean, we look at the free to play MMOs right now. Like on the pre-show, you and I, we were
Yeah.
talking about Star Wars: The Old Republic, and you really feel like a free to play player. Like, oh, this has been specifically designed to make it as uncomfortable as possible to play for free.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, and the reason we discussed this, I got a new Dell and I decided to load up, a modern game, right, that I have. So I downloaded Star Wars: The Old Republic, and I used to play it as a subscriber. It's a great game, but there's all these little pop-ups, right? Like these little icons everywhere. Oh, subscribers could do this.
Mm-hmm.
You finish a mission. Oh, you would have gotten this.
And there's even like aspects to like just make life a little nicer and more convenient that you don't get
Yeah.
access to, all the way down to certain types of gear and vehicles.
I mean, I get it. I get what EA did,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure that it's not invasive enough that I wouldn't play the game, but it does, like you said, it does feel a little dirty.
Yeah.
It feels like a Flash game in a lot of ways, right? With all those little pop-ups. Consider our affiliate, right? You remember all those from
It
back in
feels
the
like
candy stand?
it feels like when you know what it feels like is it feels like when I get a hotel room and then I go in there and everything is an upsell in the room.
Yeah, yeah. I want some coffee, $5.
Yeah. You break the seal on the fridge, $25. You know, whatever. It's like, come on. And then to be fair, there's games out there like I think Star Trek Online's free to play model is much more. Here's the two things. Star Trek Online is a game that's designed to be completely playable, free to play, and they just want you to buy stuff in the game. SOTOR is a game that's designed to be playable, but they're really selling you the subscription.
Well, I mean, I don't want to dig into this too deep because it's a little off topic. SWTOR was designed to be a subscription model,
Right,
and
yeah.
then it was retroactively made free
Yeah,
to play.
right. Well, so Star Trek Online, but
Was it really?
yeah, but Star Trek Online, even earlier in the days, they were kind of thinking we might do this, and they had already done it with Champions, so they kind of had a few models already figured out before they
Oh,
did
it makes
stuff.
sense. I mean, Star Trek is just such a lame franchise compared to Star Wars. It's the KDE. Ha!
It's
Wrong.
negative in the freedom dimension.
Curmudgeon.
Wow, they've combined their
Business?
powers. Oh.
Okay, what happened?
I just lost it. I just lost it there for a second. I needed to reset. Because for a second I almost had a heart attack.
Chris.
Why can't we love everything? I love both SOTOR and STO.
I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation this morning while I was writing up C#.
Was it a post season 3 episode?
Oh, it was from the beginning. I just discovered that it is in fact on Netflix.
Oh, you know what's a shame though, and I will just let you know, is they don't have the remasters up on Netflix. And the remasters really are a lot better.
Chris, have you heard of this app called Dropbox? Right now it's paused. But once I hit unpause, I will have no bandwidth.
Oh, okay, I see.
But we should move on to our real topic because I think we're going to go over a few minutes today, which is okay.
All right, that wasn't the real topic.
Oh,
No, what was the real? Okay, what is our? Oh, the zone.
or maybe we should hold off.
Well, we got a few minutes. I mean, it's up to
got
you.
a few minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe you should start off. How do you get in the zone, right? People keep emailing this in whatever that chat thing, Google Chat, asking about what is the workflow for me, and
Oh yeah.
mine involves caffeine.
Yeah. Oh, sure. So, I mean, I have caffeine right here next to me in a pill form, even. So
Pills. Yeah,
I gotta have it. Energy is important. For me, a huge thing to get in the zone is focus, and I think a lot of people call this ADD, but I think it's just to get in your natural creative. Everything's firing. You just kind of you need a period of time without distraction. And what I have found is sometimes I need to relax a little and just chill out and read the internet, check my favorite news sites, maybe watch a live stream of something just for a little bit and then get in. So like if I have 2 hours to work on something, sometimes I allow myself 45 minutes to just sort of unwind and shift gears. Sometimes I don't need to do that. Sometimes I do. And it's funny, depending on what I'm doing, is sometimes even like having a couple of beers will help. If I'm not doing anything that actually requires good cognition, like if I'm like, for example, sometimes if I just get in the zone and I start playing music and I have a couple of beers, I can bang through more viewer emails in 15, 20 minutes than I could in an hour. Like I'll just get in a flow. So there's that kind of zone. And then there's the editing where you really have to be focused and you're listening and you're clipping and you're moving things around. And for that, I've done it so much and so often now that as long as I kind of have the room to myself, I can slip in and out of that almost on demand now. So I've gotten really good at that. What about you?
Coffee is definitely a main ingredient. If you start with a nice coffee base. I do the occasional break thing, especially in the morning if I'm not exactly up and at them.
Yep. Yeah,
I
that
also
helps
get
a
up
lot. In fact,
very
I
early.
got like hardly no sleep last night, but because I was out running errands this morning and the sun was in my face and stuff, I actually feel pretty good. And having the caffeine.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, and we've talked about this before, but I do use the Pomodoro technique, and that just helps me kind of compartmentalize things into doable chunks. Music helps, but sometimes the headphones bother me. A lot of Netflix, to be honest, but it has to be certain things, right?
Right, can't be too distracting.
Can't be new. It has to be something, that I've watched 8,000 times.
Yeah, that's a lot of times while I'm watching Star Trek is because of that.
Yeah, for me, it's Stargate. Basically, Stargate SG-1 is a...
Or, what's funny is there's sometimes the right podcast where it's for example, if there's a podcast that's reviewing Star Wars.
Like a nice boring podcast about a topic that just is really lame, like Star Trek is really. No, yes, well,
but you know what I mean, like one that doesn't like it's because what I do is I don't know, maybe I alter between when I'm listening to a podcast. Sometimes I tune out of what I'm working on and I just like my mind just like takes a breather or something. And I'll listen to the podcast, I'll track what they're saying for a few minutes, and then I'll just kind of slip back into my work.
Right. Yeah, I don't actually watch TV. I basically I turn it into old time radio.
That was the reason I came up with the idea of these enhanced video versions, is so that way we can show something on the screen when there's something to show. But I figure the majority of the time people have us in another tab or something, or minimized, or in the car.
Yeah, and I do use podcasts for that. So I generally listen to development podcasts while I'm working, or sometimes gaming podcasts are pretty. It can't be something in depth, right? It has to be kind of a, that's why I try and keep this show very high level, very concepts, not, in the WinRT API, like nothing like that.
Right.
They usually work.
I find too, if I have something that's gnawing at me, I can a lot of times tune it out. But like yesterday, I was working on writing up the description of LAS and putting all the tags in there and stuff, and I was just kind of like, nothing was coming to me. Like, what did we talk about? How should I describe what we did? And I realized, I can't stop thinking about the fact that there's a bunch of groceries in the kitchen that need to be put away.
One issue I deal with is I'm a little weird for developers. I get up very early in the morning.
Oh, yeah?
As you've noticed from the times I'm emailing you at. And what happens
and the tweets.
Around like 3 in the afternoon, or maybe even 4, I'm done. Like, I'm just done. I can't, I'll push if I have to, but
what's funny is
I can't do it anymore. I used to be able to pull like even when we started the show, a 12-hour day was very easy for me. Now it's, I can do 10 easy, but you hit that 12 mark and I'm like, I'm done.
I've been noticing that about 5:30, 6 o'clock, I hit a wall, and I get so tired as the half-hour increments go on to where I'm like almost dead. And here's my problem: is I established the production schedule around when everybody's available, and a lot of that for hosts that have full-time jobs is in the evening, and so I'm now at a point now where like evening time comes and I'm dead tired. I'm not at my best. I'm much better at 9 a.m. than I am at 6 p.m. And so I'm doing like last week's SciBite. I am like dragging myself through it because I am so tired. I can barely get the words out of my mouth. And it's ridiculous. So you're right. I've noticed that drop off too. In my mind, there's no zone to be found when I'm that kind of tired. There's no zone. That zone doesn't exist when you're that tired. Your brain is not at any kind of capacity to function in that way.
I mean, the other thing is like, so I know the thing was about how do you get in the zone, but I also find that it can be hard to get in, but it's really hard to stay in, right? With email, I'm like an old man. With email and the constant telephone ringing, it's really can be challenging. And what I've been doing is I've been turning off my email client.
There you go. Yep. Oh, yeah.
Off and on after every Pomodoro. I'll just check it, reply, don't reply.
One of the things that really drives me absolutely, totally crazy about Android is you kind of have to go. You either have to mute your phone completely, or you have to every time you add an app, you have to go check for notification settings because my phone's just constantly beeping at me all the time, and the light's flashing and all this kind of stuff. And I gotta mute it and then I put it away. But here's the flip side, and this is Pomodoro doesn't work for me because of the type of work I do, I think. But I get so lost in my work sometimes that I will sometimes go the entire day, especially like on Wednesdays. I'll go the entire day and then realize I haven't opened my inbox at all one day. And for somebody who gets as much email as I do, it's a big problem. But it just never even crosses my mind that I should stop. It is just once I'm there, and if nothing breaks that concentration, I don't break the concentration until the job's done. I don't get up. I don't eat.
But that's exactly the point of Pomodoro, right? Because we've been talking about how it can increase productivity, but you have to stop, especially if you have meetings or calls or things you need to do in addition to what you're currently doing. I think I'm a bit like you in that one issue I kept running into was, I'd be doing something, right? I'd be developing some code on one project, and I'd hit the milestone for the day, and I'd be like, you know what? Let me just keep going because I'm on a roll. And I would forget that I had a meeting with somebody, or even just a teleconference. And the Pomodoro technique, it's very, it rings at you every half hour, 25 minutes. It seems
like a much easier thing to apply for development because you're just,
I think,
when you're editing, you're kind of working around the schedule of when something needs to render and when something's going to transfer and stuff like, it's almost like the system and the limitations of the technology sort of set the schedule in a lot of ways. At least I feel like it just feels like I'd be wasting time to get up after 20 minutes and then come down and work for 5 minutes and then need to hit export and have it and just sit there for 30 minutes.
I think it's also hard to, and it's weird to say, but as a consultant to actually work during business hours and to do real work like actual coding, I find very, very hard. Just because the email and the phone and I'm with a client now and I love them. They're great, but the team is growing and everybody who's new always has a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can spend your day chatting with everybody.
Or responding to emails
or looking over code reviews. And it can just be like, okay, and to be honest, that's kind of why I like the morning schedule because nobody's awake.
Yeah. And I think also the reason why you and I work best at home is because we like to have our own space. I'll give you an example, man. When I have to work at a computer where the resolution on the screen is super low and the computer's I can be pretty adaptable because I've worked with a lot of crap computers. But there's just that line you'll cross where you have a certain amount of work and you're under a certain amount of time and pressure and a deadline and you're working with a substandard system. And I sit here and I think, gosh, my setup at home is so much better. If I was just working at home right now, this would be a lot easier. And so I find I am never in the zone like I'm in the zone in my office, in my own workspace that I've created. I can be productive at another office, at somebody's office, but I'm never in the zone like I am at home. Do you find that, or are you able to get that true, like, I can channel the power of the coding gods?
No, but I think it's different because I do not like to go on site unless I have to.
Oh, yeah. Well, who does?
It's also because on site is usually Manhattan, right? And so that's an hour and a half train ride plus the subway, and it's actually fairly costly.
Yeah. I hate it when I have to go to Seattle, so I kind of know what you mean there.
Yeah. What kind of happens is I end up in a room and I just constantly have meetings all day. So, and that's the other thing. A meeting day, I hate when people schedule meetings spaced apart, right? If like you have a meeting and then you have a 20-minute gap and then another meeting. I try and just go back to back. Just to kind of, if I could do all my coding in the morning or in the early afternoon, take meetings from 3 to 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I think if I could rejuggle my schedule completely, I would do all of my shows in the mornings, and then I would do the editing in the early afternoons, and then I would do all of the back end business stuff in the later afternoon. That would be kind of a nice schedule for me because that sort of fits my energy tone. Where the most energy is when I'm on air. That way I'm not bringing it down, and then I kind of move that energy still into the creative process of editing and publishing, and then simmer down. But the problem is you can't always do that. And that's where really the challenge of getting the zone is sometimes you just got to work with what you got.
Well, there are days that are just bad days. I mean, hopefully they're not often. Maybe you haven't had this experience, but there's just some days it's just not going to happen, right? And that's why employees' places have vacation time and personal days. And sometimes it's hard when you work for yourself, but I'm the worst offender at this. you should at least allot yourself, a week or 2 weeks vacation and X personal days and actually take them. Right.
Not a staycation.
Oh, I do staycations.
No, that doesn't count because you always end up working. I've tried them.
I know. I do it too.
The problem is all my toys are at home. So it is,
Yeah.
My problem is I can't just look, see, the other problem is that because I do work from home, I don't ever really get an opportunity to sit in my home office and not feel the weight of the responsibility of the things that I could be doing in this home office to get something done, right? So it's very hard for me to sit here and play BioShock.
That's the thing. I can't do not work in my office. Right. And actually Gatorbite has a awesome point. He actually turned, so outside of his house proper, he turned his garage into an office.
Yeah, that made it, my studio is out in my garage, and
right.
if timing and money gets to a point, we want to take a condo that we have and convert that into a Jupiter Broadcasting studio. And I've talked to a lot of guys who worked at home for years and said the best thing they did was get an office.
I've thought about it, but it's just really hard for me
to justify the cost. Yeah, tell me about it.
Right, because I have the space in my house already that's literally not used for anything else.
And the thing that you're justifying is not quite tangible, because what they've always said the benefits are is it's this huge perspective switch shift for them. Like, they feel like they're going into work in the morning, and that completely gears their mind for work. And then when they leave, they switch gears again, and they come home, and they're home, and they don't feel like they have that pressure of work. And they, and the guys have told me, like, it's completely changed their lives. And they often will say, I wish I would have done it years ago. But it's like, well, okay, there's the cost, and then what the benefit is what is this hippie good feeling? What is it exactly that I'm getting from this?
And that's the thing for me. If I had like a full-time or even 30 hours part-time employee,
yeah,
then I could justify the office. But
right.
I don't know how office space is in Washington, but in New Jersey, it's not cheap.
No, yeah.
And down here, maybe it's not fair because a lot of places are still wrecked from the hurricane.
And I do kind of get that effect. Like when I go out in the studio in the morning to turn things on, it does feel like I'm going to work a little bit, because I'm going out there. I got to turn everything on, and it's a different area of my house. It's not like any other spot in my house, and it's isolated, so I don't really hear anything that's going on, and so it helps.
It would be something I'd love to try, but the problem is I'd have to rent an office to try it.
Yep, I know.
You have to lease a space for 3 months at least. 6 months.
One of the guys I was talking with was buddies with another guy who works at home, and they co-rent an office, and then they just kind of like, hey, I'm going to be here on Wednesdays and Friday, and that's how they do it.
Yeah, it's something I have looked into. Ultimately, I think it's something I'm going to end up having to do.
Yeah. I think I will have to as well. I'm going to have 3 kids in my house, for one.
Right. For you, it's really, it's going to become impossible at some point. For me, I have time, but.
And see, right now, they're not really in my hair, but once Angela has another kid, if I'm home, I have to be helping out a lot more. So I will have to figure that out. And, maybe I'll end up moving out to the condo if we get more sponsors and money comes in, then that might actually end up happening. And that could be a really good thing. Who knows? But until then, it's hard to really quantify it.
It's hard to quantify it. And, if your business has cycles where you've, 6 months low, but then the rest of the year makes up for it. Yeah. It's really hard to justify a steady monthly cost like that.
Yeah, because talk about just something that cuts into your rainy day fund.
Well, like that, if you have, maybe a month you don't have a contract, well, what are you paying, X dollars for this office for, right? It's, we should talk about, audience, if you're, if you have done this co-working or renting an office, I would love to hear how that worked out. And if you're in the New Jersey area, central New Jersey, near
and you have a good taste in podcasts.
Yeah, and are near Monmouth Army Base, I would love to know, if you're a realtor and have a space. I'd love to see kind of what the deal is with so the other side of this is the co-working deals. And I don't get that.
Yeah, it seems like a worst case scenario.
It seems like the worst of both worlds. So now I'm stuck with a bunch of other developers who all we're going to do is argue about Emacs and Vim all day.
Mike West in the chat room brings up a good point. Alan, recently bought himself a new house, and he specifically has a separate office downstairs for work that is completely like in a different area of his house. I think that's I think if you have that opportunity, that's a great way to go. But I would love so go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, you guys, hit contact, choose Coda Radio. If you have done this, or if you know somebody who's doing this, or like you're in Mike's area, let us know. I'd be really curious to know how this works.
What you're doing, because I could do what Alan's done. I have the whole room. It's just hard because part of it's also storage.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's...
And is it enough? That's the question. Is that enough?
Well, it does the job.
You would really need 2 workspaces, though, and that, when you're looking at how valuable your home space is, that is very... because you'd really need a spot where you can just go be a computer guy and just a geek and geek out on the internet and not think about work, and then you need a spot where you can go work, and that seems like in both locations you need equipment, you need a spot to sit, and you need a desk. That's a lot of real estate in your house.
What's weird now is I have different equipment for different stuff now. And
well, I totally understand that in a way.
It's actually becoming cluttered because the Dell is a big tower and the Mac is no longer hooked up.
Yep. I got these Hackintoshes in my way constantly, dude. I know what you're going through.
Yeah, it's kind of like we should definitely follow up on this at a later
we
date.
could do a thing on gear and managing gear and keeping everything up to date and testing and what you need to keep around for all that. Yeah, that could be an interesting.
Because it's just stockpiling at this point. Android devices alone are at hand.
I'm buried in Android devices. All right, Mr. Dominic. Anything else you want to cover before we get out of here?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, where should people find you throughout the week?
They can find me at mdominic.com and Twitter @Tumanuku and Google+.
Of course, we've got links to those and my social profiles in the show notes. Don't forget, Coda Radio is live Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, over at jblive.tv, and then available for download shortly after that over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. I'd like to make a request to go leave us a comment or a rating in the iTunes store. Let's go game that system. Let's help Discovery out, right? A little Discovery. All right, Mr. Dominic, thanks for the great show.
Thank you.
And thanks to our chat room for joining us this week. And thank you, everyone, for downloading us. We'll see you right back here next week.